Greetings and welcome to Onshape Live 22. Thank you for being here. My name is Matt Shields. I'm joined today by Naomi Edwards. We are on the education team here at PTC, and we are so excited for this session, preparing students for success with curriculum and certification. As a little introduction, again, my name is Matt Shields. I have spent most of my life in a classroom. I went to college 4 times, earning a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and most recently a PhD in curriculum and instruction. I also taught at the high school level for 16 years. Most recently, I spent 7 years building, designing, and running the engineering program in Charlottesville City Schools. It was during that time that I led the transition away from an old CAD platform to my favorite new cool CAD platform, and that is Onshape. Naomi.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Hi, I'm Naomi Edwards. I also have been in the classroom. I spent 15 years teaching at the high school level, and I started off with software. That's my background, but I've really fallen in love with making things and designing things. So got to teach robotics and engineering classes, and that's where I used Onshape in my classroom. And I just truly enjoyed using it, and the way that it changed the way that I teach and the impact that it had with students. So I'm really excited to be here today to share any experience that I have with you, as well as share some resources that we have that you can utilize right away in your classroom. So I'm hoping today is something useful for you, and we're looking forward to sharing our session goals. So what we want to share today is first some curriculum. Matt's going to go over a really wonderful curriculum that you can utilize in your classroom right away. It has everything that you need to get started, and it's free. As well as we're going to go over some certification. What does that test actually look like, and how will you prepare for that with your students? And we have some wonderful resources for you there. As well as, because we have such great experience that we want to share, the teaching tools. We want to spend some time giving you something that you can walk away with tomorrow and start using in your classroom. And you know, Onshape's still pretty new and emerging, and there's a lot of things to still learn about it. So we know that there's stuff here for teachers who are just getting started, who are kind of new, but also for those who have been doing this for a while. We know that there's a little twist that can be put on things because Onshape has such great features to be used in the classroom. So also, I do want to remind you, if you have any questions, throw them in the moderated Q&A, and we are definitely going to provide some time for that at the end. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to start off on curriculum.
Thanks, Naomi. So as Naomi said, our goal today is to provide tips and tools and resources for you to be successful in the classroom as well as your students. And that is why we created our new Intro to CAD curriculum. And as a teacher, I know that all that goes into a great curriculum, and of course, it's way more than a textbook or some how-to videos, and that's what we've included in this curriculum. So when you check out this curriculum, you'll find it's loaded with all of the things you'll need to run the curriculum from start to finish. If you're a brand new teacher, we've filled it with resources just for you. So you'll find that there are student guides, teacher guides, assessments, literally everything you'll need to run the course. The course is divided into 5 units, and at the typical pace of maybe 4 to 5 hours per week, the course should take about 9 weeks to run in your classroom. So let's dive in and find out a little bit more about what's in the course. My favorite thing about the course is that the vast majority of the content is embedded in an Onshape document. So if you're familiar with Onshape, you know it is a powerful professional level CAD platform. But what's really cool about an Onshape document is that it can hold just about any type of content. So on the screen right now, you're seeing one of the first lessons in Unit 1. Your students will get access to this really cool model of a full suspension bike. But on top of that, you'll also see that the instructions for the lesson are embedded right there in the Onshape document. So that's a really cool way to present the media-rich instructions that come with this course, all right there in an Onshape document. And as a teacher, I know that students are really good at losing stuff, so it's hard to lose your work when everything's embedded in one document. So that's where a bulk of the content's going to live. Also, with each lesson, you're going to find teacher guides. So if you're a new teacher, this is literally everything you'll need to run the course. We start with some learning objectives, standards alignment. We give you some extra teacher tips and vocabulary. Any kind of assessment that's included in the lesson is also there in the teacher guide. So if you're a new teacher, we've got you covered. And if you're an older, more experienced teacher, there's still going to be lots of resources and tips for you in the teacher guides. On top of that, we've included lesson slides with every single lesson. And so we found that it's helpful if you've got a smartboard or a projector to have something up on the screen to help you as you run the lesson. So you might, each lesson slide, each set of lesson slides comes with warm-up slides, maybe some guiding questions, maybe some just tips or ideas for students as they go through the lesson, any kind of culminating exit ticket or anything like that. So we've added these lesson slides just as a resource for you as you run the lessons. And also, these are Google Docs, and so it makes it really easy for you to edit if you want to. These are just free resources for you. If you want to edit them, you can edit them all you want. On top of that, each lesson comes with student guides. Now, as I mentioned, a bulk of the content in each lesson resides in the Onshape document. But we've also added these student guides just as a quick reference for students as they go through the lesson. And also, these are Google Docs, which makes them, you can edit them and copy them all you want. And also, it's easy to embed these in an LMS. And so if you've got something like Canvas or Google Classroom, you can drop them right in. If you don't have an LMS, feel free to print these out and hand them to your students. Again, we're just trying to provide resources to make sure that you are as prepared and successful as possible with the curriculum. And I think the student guides will be a big help. Now, as a teacher, I know that good curriculum comes with frequent and relevant assessment. And so we've provided lots of opportunities for assessment in this curriculum. Throughout every lesson, there are opportunities for students to do self-checks. There are exit tickets, just kind of quick formative assessments at the end of every lesson. And at the end of every unit, we've provided a summative assessment and an answer key. And those are all, again, Google Docs. So if you want to use half of them or edit them, that is totally up to you, and they're free for you to do that. With each unit, we've also included lecture slides. And the reason for that is this is already a really full, rich curriculum, but we wanted to make sure that it was embedded in the larger framework of engineering, design, and even career paths. And so we've added lecture slides for each unit that really kind of situate CAD in a larger context. And I think that's a really nice part of the curriculum. You can deliver these lecture slides maybe at the beginning or the end of a unit, and you're in one big lecture, or you might chop the lecture up into little mini lectures, just kind of sprinkle throughout the unit. Again, these are Google Docs. You can edit them, maybe just drop them right into your LMS and assign the lecture slides for your students to read through at their own pace, and maybe provide a reflection or something like that. Or maybe even use these slides as a launching pad for students to do some research and present to the class. It's totally up to you. We're just providing some resources for you and your students. When I was a teacher, one of the things I did struggle with was pacing. And so we've provided a summary and pacing guide with each unit. That just helps teachers with their planning and as they're trying to figure out what they're gonna do each year, each 9 weeks. And so we've provided pacing guides to give you a good sense of how long these lessons will take. And we've also done standards aligned for every single lesson. So whether you're using the Common Core State Standards or Next Generation Science Standards, we've fully aligned the entire curriculum with these standards, and we've created a standards alignment document organized both by lesson and by standard. So if you're in a district like so many that has a high emphasis on standards, we've got you covered there. So like I said, this is new curriculum, but it has been out in beta for a few months, and already we're getting some great feedback from teachers. On the left, you can see a screenshot from a teacher that was really excited how easy it was to embed all of this content right into their LMS. And so as they were creating lessons, it was easy as just posting our content right into their LMS. On the right, you'll see a tweet from John Keller. He was excited that his students were really enjoying one of the first lessons. I think that's the first lesson, the scavenger hunt activity, where students are diving in collaboratively and doing a scavenger hunt in Onshape. It's a really fun activity. So John Keller, thank you. If you're out there right now, thanks for the tweet. And anyone else, please keep tweeting, find us on social media. We love feedback. We love hearing from people that are using our content. So please give us a shout out whenever you're using it. And so that is our new Intro to CAD curriculum. It is free and it's in the Learning Center right now. So go to learn.onshape.com, click on the Educator Resources tab, and you'll find our new curriculum, the Intro to CAD curriculum. While I'm talking about the Learning Center, I should mention that the Learning Center is actually chock full with dozens and dozens of guides and lessons and videos for you to help you get either up to speed if you're new at Onshape, or to help you dive into some of the more complex and advanced features of Onshape. There's a ton in the Learning Center. You should definitely check it out. I'd love to highlight one of the courses in the Learning Center right now, and that's called our Teaching a Class in Onshape course. That's just about a 45-minute class designed for teachers. If you're going to use Onshape in the classroom, it gives you some best practices for using Onshape in the classroom. Everything from organizing your students into teams, how to create assignment documents, how to distribute documents to your students, and also how to receive feedback and give feedback back to your students. So definitely check out that course if you're going to be using Onshape in your class. And then once you and your students have mastered Onshape, you're going to want to show off your mastery by earning your certification, and Naomi's going to tell us all about that.
All right, thanks, Matt. Yeah, let's talk about certification. So for teachers who are new to this, you may want to just hang in there and pay attention, because it's going to give you an idea of what this certification looks like in the future when you're ready to attack that with your kids. For those of you who are veteran teachers and you're ready to take on certification, or maybe you're a CTE teacher and you need certification for funding for yourself in the state that you're in, this is definitely going to be a section that's helpful for you. So let's take a look at the two certs that we have. On the left is the associate certification. That's for educators and students and entry-level engineers. It says 30 hours of experience. However, I do suggest, both Matt and I suggest, students are going to need a little more time than that, especially if they're starting out the year, they're freshmen and they're new. Give them a little more time and more activities in class to prepare for this. 30 hours is going to be a little short. So on the right, we have the professional certification, and that's meant for people who are already out in industry and working in their career. And it will test over everything on the associate's exam, plus product release and data management. So we're going to focus in on this associate's exam on the left. On the next slide, let's talk about how we can help you prepare. On the left is the curriculum that Matt just went over. It's a wonderful curriculum to start your students off with, because it's going to focus on all aspects of design, teaching them design intent, as well as just overall how to use Onshape. And it's more than just this test prep, so it's a well-rounded way to get started with students. Next is the Learning Center up there. It's free. You can assign sections to students to prepare for the exam. They can work through it on a self-pace, and of course, everything is free. The curriculum from ITEA is brand new. Wonderful curriculum for teachers to use in the classroom with their students to help them prepare for, taking the exam. It provides drawings and places for students to model and practice all of that. And it's meant for a teacher to lead that in the classroom. Next is Solid Professor, which is a self-paced course that students can take. And when you purchase a license for students to use, it also provides a voucher for students to take the exam. Okay, on to the next slide. So there are 4 big ideas that are tested on the exam. The first one is part modeling, which includes sketching and feature creation, but also multi-part modeling, which is where students need to be able to create models together that have relationships with each other within the same part studio, as well as making edits, because students aren't always comfortable going back and changing the models that they've made and editing those dimensions as they keep moving forward. So that's something to keep in mind while you're working with your students on that, as well as assembling parts. They will need to understand all the mates, as well as how to define motion within an assembly. And then if they've never used standard content before, we suggest give them a chance to put nuts and bolts inside of an assembly so they're comfortable with that before they get started. Engineering drawings is something that they're going to need to be very comfortable reading, though they don't have to actually make their drawings themselves. And then sharing and collaboration, students should understand how do they share their documents, what kind of properties and permissions can be associated with them, and what kind of collaboration can be done within the document. So let's show a breakdown of the questions. The modeling section will cover just the part modeling and the assembly portions of the test. It'll be 15 questions and account for 70% of the points. The knowledge base section will be multiple choice questions. There are 30 questions with 1 point each, and it will cover all 4 sections of the exam. So something to keep in mind. On the next slide, now that you know what it looks like, let's get into what the actual exam, like what that platform is going to look like for you and your students. Down in the center is the exam, and the questions will be presented there, and then the multiple choice answers are provided on the right, where they'll just submit their answers through that. They will also have 2 other windows open. On the left is the document with drawings, and that's a PDF only file or document that will be provided for them when they start the test, and it will give all of the dimensions and the call outs that they need for the model they're going to make. On the right will be a modeling window provided for them that provides that area for them to just make the part. So between the 2 screens, the document with the PDF and the modeling window, they're going to need to have both windows open and be able to go between them very easily, and they're going to take up a lot of space. So we don't have to worry too much about the exam question because they won't hit that quite as often, but between the 2 windows, we really, really recommend that students have access to 2 monitors while taking this exam. So let's go over some test tips for the exam. It is 180 minutes, and that's a hard deadline. So they do need to have a space where they can take this exam for the 180 minutes and not have to change rooms or change computers. So provide that for your students. Next, we always recommend that you go over some test taking tips. It's always great to skip those hard questions and come back to them. We know that that's something that can help a student feel confident on a test, and the platform will tell them if they've skipped a question so they don't have to worry about missing it entirely and not turning one in. Do give your students some time to practice modeling quickly. That is a practice that's really helpful for students if they've been under the gun a little bit and they understand how that pressure feels, as well as understanding the keyboard shortcuts that are available to them and if they want to customize their own shortcuts in Onshape. Not only that, but they do need to read all parts carefully. We do notice that students tend to miss questions just because they kind of glossed over something and they may have missed it. And I think that goes without saying for those of you who are educators out there. As well as, again, use the 2 monitors if you can manage to get a hold of them. And lastly, we do recommend that the educator take the exam, as it's a great way for you to understand what that pacing looks like, how it will feel, how much pressure of time will be on you, and you get to have that certificate in the end, which is great to add to your resume as well. So at this time, now that we've taken a look at the exam, I'm going to pass it back to Matt, and he's going to take over the next section.
Great. Thanks, Naomi. We want to end today with some tips and tricks for the busy teacher. So again, our goal is to ensure that you and your students are successful, and we've got some ideas to help you using Onshape in the classroom. All of our tips today are going to be organized around the typical teacher workflow. Most teachers are engaged in the practice of creating assignments, distributing those assignments to their students, receiving back student work, providing feedback and assessment and grading, and hopefully creating a collaborative classroom, which Onshape does so well. So let's just briefly, kind of high level, the assignment workflow that is really helpful is for a teacher to create maybe a starter document. And we're going to get more into that idea in a minute, and more into what goes into a starter document. Once the teacher's done that, they're going to share that document with their students. The students then create their own copy of that starter document to work in. And then once they've got their work done, they can submit that document back to the teacher, either by sharing it with the teacher, sharing their own copy that they made with the teacher, or just sending a link to the document through their LMS. Those are great workflows. So let's dive in a little more into what some of those steps entail. Let's start with the starter document. Oh, and by the way, pro tip, when students do create their own copy, it's a good idea to have some unique identifier like their name in the title of the document. That makes retrieving and finding the documents later a little bit easier. So let's get into the starter document. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the cool things about Onshape is that there are so many types of media that can go into an Onshape document. That makes it great for a teacher to scaffold or provide content right in the Onshape document. So what you're seeing right now is the cell phone holder project that a teacher created. So what they did is they created an Onshape document, and then they also had some instructions and a grading rubric in a PDF form. They dropped that PDF into the document. So right there, the instructions for the assignment are right in the same document that the students will be working on. I found that to be really helpful. Next, because this is a phone holder project, why not provide the CAD model for the phone itself as students are working? So for this also speeds things up. It provides maybe some standardization so that every student is designing around the same phone. And because the goal isn't to have students creating a phone, but a phone holder, this can make the project a little easier, a little bit of scaffolding. And also students can learn about in-context design as they model their holder around this existing phone CAD model. And because Onshape can hold pictures, why not provide some inspiration pictures? So again, maybe get the juices flowing, maybe share some ideas or pictures with your students. So here is a phone holder that looks like it's on a motorcycle. You've got a phone holder sitting on a desk. You've got a nice simple wooden phone holder. So just some ideas that you might want to drop into that document to get your students thinking. And then finally, you might want to further scaffold or further kind of constrain the solutions that students come up with by providing a starter CAD model that they have to kind of build off of. So maybe all of the phone holders have to attach to some existing thing, some part of the motorcycle or some CAD model that you already have. So those are some ideas that can kind of go into creating a starter document. So when a student, especially a student that's new to CAD, opens up Onshape, they aren't looking at a blank canvas, but they've got instructions that are, again, really hard to lose, and they've got some other types of scaffolding embedded. Now, next, when students are ready to submit their work, this is also one of my favorite parts, was when students were ready to submit their work, what they were submitting when they submitted an Onshape document wasn't just the CAD model. What you're looking at on the screen right now is a submission of a trebuchet project that in my class a couple years ago. And so you can see that when the students submitted the project, I can see their full CAD model, but they also could document their entire engineering process. So you can see drawings, you can see charts, you can see testing data, you can see iteration and documentation and lessons learned. And they were able to embed so much just in this one Onshape document. So Onshape ends up being a great tool as a sort of a portfolio or a final documentation of the entire kind of path of a project. And I love that. And because it's all in one document, it's really easy, just one link drop into the LMS. It's also easy to share with your friends or family. And so I think Allie and Beth wanted to show off their awesome trebuchet project. They could send a link to anyone that was interested, and all the entire documentation of their work was right there in the document. Next, I want to share quick 3 tips for feedback and assessment that Onshape makes easy and actually kind of fun. The first is comments. And so as you hopefully know, that Onshape is completely cloud native. That means I can access it from anywhere. I could be in the back of a meeting, have my phone or tablet or Chromebook, anything open, and provide and kind of like access my student documents and provide quick and relevant feedback. And as we know, quick and relevant and frequent feedback is part of that learning loop that hopefully all teachers and students are engaged in. And so it's so easy in Onshape just to open up a comment, type a quick comment to a student. You can also tag geometry or parts or features, which is really cool. So I can click on an extrusion and say, hey, Johnny, you might want to make that longer or something like that. Or as you can see on the screen, there's actually an annotated screenshot option in Onshape when I'm creating a comment. So I can take a screenshot, point to a specific edge. I can even tag an edge also, and then I can point to it and say, hey, you guys might want to check this out. Then I can even assign my comment to a student. And so a student gets a notification that says your teacher has just assigned a comment to you, and they can check it out. They can make a change, or we can engage in conversation. And so that feedback loop that is so important to learning is really kind of fun when you're using comments in Onshape. Next, just as a quick tip for assessment, definitely check out the measurement and the mass properties tools in Onshape. In this example, I was having my students create a skateboard, and all of the trucks should have been about the same. And so in order for me to check and make sure the students were on the right path, or for them to self-assess themselves, all they had to do was assign a material to the truck, in this case aluminum, and just click the truck and then see if it's about 0.2 pounds, you're on the right path. Or also in the measurement tool and in the mass properties tool, you can measure just about anything. You can measure radius, angle, length, area, volume, center of mass. All of those things can be helpful in assessing if students are on the right path. And then finally, one of my favorite features in Onshape is versioning. Versioning is a powerful tool in Onshape. It's also a powerful and very common tool in professional workflows. So I think it's great that students get exposure to things like versions when they're working in Onshape. And what a version is, it's a snapshot of their work at the time of the version. And where I use this a lot in my classroom was I often had my students engage in projects that spanned many weeks. And so every Friday, I wanted to see a milestone of how much work they had gotten done over the week. And it was as easy as clicking create version in Onshape and then send me the link. And what was great was maybe Friday at the end of class, student creates a version, sends me a link. And then maybe during lunch, they want to keep working, or maybe over the weekend, they want to keep working. And I don't get around to grading it till Monday. When I click the link they send me, I am seeing their model as it existed Friday morning when the assignment was due, even though they may have put hours and hours of more work after the fact. I'm seeing that snapshot. It made creating those milestones just really easy. And I could just click the link and see what the students had been up to. And it also turned out to be a really great tool for documentation, because the students were creating milestones or versions every Friday. And because they got good at it, they were creating versions all the time whenever they created some kind of accomplish something in their project. So when they were documenting their work at the end, they had a history, they had kind of a timeline of their work, and it made it really easy for them to kind of document their entire project. So I loved using versions in my class. And next, Naomi is going to get into what is probably the coolest part about Onshape, and that's how it enables collaboration.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So on the screen right now, you're going to see two videos of people modifying or modeling at the exact same time. It's actually Matt and I, and we're 3,000 miles apart, and we're both modeling off the exact same sketch at the exact same time. We took the videos simultaneously. It's such a neat feature and something that I totally overlooked when I first started using this as a teacher. I think it was really natural to adopt Onshape, but then treat it just like another CAD platform. And this surprised me when I first started using Onshape, and I thought, oh my gosh, my kids are both in the same part studio and they're doing everything together at the same time. You'll even see us flip the color at the same time, and it kind of flips back and forth. And that's impressive. Like, that's something that as a teacher, you just realize that you don't have to worry about the kids missing a beat between what one person's doing and the other person's doing, and ending up with different versions of the same part in the end. So let's take that collaboration to another step. How can we really jump in and utilize all of Onshape's great collaboration features? How can that facilitate more collaboration in your classroom? So I like to do this within the context of a project that we did. I think it helps describe ways that you might be able to capitalize on this. I chose to do a gumball machine project in my classroom. You can see it there on the right. It starts at the top, there's gumballs up there, and it goes down and around that pillar, and each section was done by a group of 2 students. So I put them in their pairs. They were in charge of designing those. The rules were that they had to interface all of the sections so they knew where the ball was coming from, where it was going to be going, and it would have a smooth transition all the way to the bottom. And I gave them a set of constraints like dimensions, material, and time. But in this case, I do want to point out that my goal wasn't just to teach them how to sketch or teach them how to do an assembly. The goal really was to provide them a big collaborative project that they could work on together and struggle with together and end up with a really cool product in the end. So let's see how I actually organized this. I had about 30 students in this class. They were in grades 9 through 12. So I had a wide level of abilities in there as well. And it's just a lot of kids. But what I chose to do is have one document where every student had edit access and they all logged in. And then I created folders for them within the document. So that narrowed the scope for them, and they knew where they were supposed to be working. So they could get into their folder with their part studio and their assembly, and they could work on that collaboration there just with the 2 of them. Now, what you see on the screen there is actually the full assembly of everybody's, where it would be placed theoretically up on the board, because we did transition to just a 2-dimensional type gumball. But that will show all the different changes that are happening along the way, and it will populate as it goes. So each time the students log in, they're getting to see what other students are doing. Not only that, because they all have edit access into this document, they can see what everybody else is doing on each team. And I know there's some fear sometimes where you're like, oh, maybe you really want your students to be able to do that on their own. And that, I think, is really valuable in a skill setting. But because we're working so heavily with collaboration on this project, I actually found that students tended to see each other's work, and they would ramp their work up a little bit more to kind of try to one up each other. And what I ended up with in the end was something that was better than I probably would have assigned to them just to start with. They really took it to a new level. And I think that that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. The quality that you can get when students see what everybody's doing at the exact same time. So let's take a look at the next slide. One of the things that was a big focus for me is how do I build collaboration into the classroom? And Onshape actually was a huge part of that, because there's some features here that allow my students to be a little more forgiving with each other, as well as forgiving with themselves when they're working on a project. The first one being, I think we've all heard this from a student when they say, I'm scared, I don't want to change anything. I know my partner's been working on this particular thing, and if I want to make this change, I could break it. And we have students that stall, and then they don't want to try out their ideas. And Matt already brought up versioning, which is really great on the teacher end, because that gives you the ability to grade that snapshot in time, but it also is the chance for you to roll it back and say, okay, maybe you broke it, but we can roll it back to the version that we set, and it's like that safety ground, it's that save point that you have. But more importantly, one of the things that really can let students go wild collaboratively is branching. Maybe you have a group of students, or maybe you have one student that's like, I really have a great idea and I don't have a great way to explain it other than just to go ahead and model it, but I'm afraid of breaking something. Give them a branch, show them how to make a branch, let them go wild. They can make all the changes they want. And then you as the teacher can facilitate something like a design review, which is another way to get really productive talk happening in your classroom. And then you can decide what branches, or if you wanted to, if you just that one branch, if you want to bring it back into the main, and then everybody just keeps working like nothing weird has happened. It's an amazing way to build confidence for students in the classroom with this tool. So in the end, we ended up with, this is where we kind of, as a couple years went on, the project, it ended up looking like this. And the thing I want to point out is that there's multiple layers of collaboration that happened in here with Onshape that I wasn't able to do with my previous CAD system. So you can see that there are boxes on the screen there, and some of them are just really pretty mellow because those are 9th grade teams, and they needed just some practice on making some platforms and some spinning things. And then I had some advanced students that were able to do some really cool stuff there too. But I had the whole team collaborating because they all had to decide what this whole thing was going to look like. Then I had my sub teams collaborating because they had to know where the gumball was coming in from, and they had to talk to the partners below them to know where it was going to go out. And then of course you had a lot of collaboration just in pairs that was happening in the classroom. I just can't stress enough how much switching to Onshape really made a big difference and allowed me as the teacher to take on something like this that I wouldn't have normally done with another CAD platform. That collaborative nature in Onshape really provided a safe place for my students to really work together, like genuinely work together. So it's something that you don't have to go out and build, though. I do want to say, like, if that's really intimidating, especially if you're a new teacher to this, you don't have to manufacture this all. You may not even have access to all of that. But if you built it in Onshape, it's still a wonderful product that they could see within an assembly, and they could move parts around, and it would still have really great value to show to the community and something like that. So I hope you really enjoyed listening to some of the things that we had to share today. And I know that we really packed a lot of stuff in. Stay tuned though, because we do put out a lot of webinars, so stay in touch. And hopefully you've got some things that you can walk away with today that you can use in your classroom right away. And at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Jess, and we would love to open it up for some Q&A.
Great. Thank you both, Matt and Naomi. We do have quite a few questions coming in already, so I will get started with those. First question, are there any lessons to teach individual features of Onshape to students?
Yeah, I would say the best resource there for individual features, the Intro to CAD curriculum I mentioned does get into some individual features. You learn about extrude, revolve, loft, and sweep pretty early on, but also check out the Learning Center. There's some great, I think CAD Basics is a course in the Learning Center that gets into specific features. Naomi, can you think of any other ones?
I think those are all great resources.
Great, thank you. How many hours of instruction is projected with your curriculum?
I think the goal was 9 weeks, so maybe 40, 45 hours of instruction. 9 weeks running at about 4 to 5 hours per week, I think was the goal.
What is the total amount of time needed for each lesson?
We tried to build those lessons out to be about an hour to start with, and then as they move farther in through the curriculum, they're a little bit more project-y, so they take a little bit longer. I could see some of those lessons that where they're actually building some more of the complicated parts later on. They might take 3 or 4 days on each one, but they start out with about an hour per lesson.
And then are the lessons available in Spanish?
So we have provided a translation document. If you email us and let us know that you are interested in getting that, we can definitely share that with you. And we give instructions on how we can get it translated.
Can the curriculum be used with elementary and middle school students, so 5th through 8th graders?
That's a great question. I have used Onshape with 5th graders, and I have found that that's an appropriate age group. This content, it is really intended for a beginner, and it's not that heavy on the reading. There's a lot of animations and videos embedded in the curriculum. So I could see 5th grade handling it, and then definitely up to 7th and 8th grade. I've seen, that age range takes to Onshape pretty quickly in my experience.
And then we do have some people actually asking if they can get a copy of the projects that you both presented. So the Gumball machine and the Trebuchet project. Are those things that you would be able to share?
I'd be happy to. I've got some great documents that my students created or lessons that I created. Maybe curriculum support at ptc.com might be a good, send us an email. Yeah, happy to help out, provide lessons or however we can. Sure.
Great. Then we have, I teach engineering graphics, which includes covering screw threads. When will Onshape be adding native cosmetic threads in Part Studio without using a feature script? Also, when will Onshape add true external simplified threads or sketching with dashed lines in drawings?
That's a really good question. We will have to answer that one offline, though.
Thank you. And then, how can we support teaching Onshape when other CAD is predominant in business use?
Well, that's also a really good question because we know that there are competitor softwares out there that maybe are used more in certain pockets and areas in industry. And the one thing that I can say, though, is the fact that this is going to take all these other obstructions out of the way for you to teach CAD in the classroom and give you the ability to use whatever hardware you have access to, that, go with that first, because this is still going to give you the ability to teach design intent and go through understanding just design and how you model and parametric modeling. That's all important stuff and can be translated to any software that the student will end up having to use in the end. But again, I just can't, the fact that it is free to use and the fact that you can use it on any computer that you have access to in your school, and it takes away all of the updating and all of that off your plate. This is a huge benefit.
And I'll add to that. To be honest, I shifted to Onshape during the pandemic as sort of an emergency stopgap because my students didn't have access to our big expensive computer lab. And then it was when we started using Onshape, I thought, okay, then someday I'll go back to my old platform. I realized this is the future of CAD, that any professional software is moving in this direction. Everyone is, I think, to be honest, trying to catch up to Onshape right now in moving their products fully into the cloud, and Onshape's just light years ahead in that regard. And so I do think this is the future of CAD. Lots of professional companies are using it. We're in contact every day with big companies all around the globe that are using this for their main product development. Trek bicycles, and there are robotics and aquatics companies all over the planet that are using Onshape as their sole product development platform. And so I did have this idea that, okay, I'll need to move to a real CAD platform when I'm done with Onshape, but I do honestly believe that it's where students should be learning. And so I think your students, if they get into Onshape, are actually just going to be ahead of the curve.
We do have a good question about certification. So how much harder is the professional exam versus associate level? My district wants me to be professional certified before investing into enterprise. What should I focus on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you haven't done the associate's exam, start there. And then there are really great self-paced learning opportunities in our learn.onshape.com webpage. So I would go through those, and those are really going to take the time to help you understand what's going to be tested on and what you need to, how to focus on that for the test.
That and model. The more time you have on the platform, the better, the more smooth the exams are going to be.
Are there best practices for making sketches, 3D shapes? Yeah.
Yes, I mean there's definitely best practices, and I think they're embedded in our curriculum. Like when you're making sketches, your whole goal is to reflect your design intent. What's in your brain. You need to communicate that to Onshape, and usually what you want to do is create fully constrained sketches. So when you're creating sketch geometry, it starts off blue, and then if you fully constrained it, it turns black, which means the computer knows where it is. And then when you're creating geometry, often, sometimes one of the things I see students do when they're new to a CAD platform, they'll create some geometry and then they'll say, oh, it's too big. And so then they'll cut off some of it. But the way you might actually create, a physical object, I think a best practice is to actually go back and edit the things you've done already to reflect your design intent. So instead of cutting some off, just go back and edit that original feature and make it smaller.
Yeah, I think I would add to that if any way that you can help students understand the feature tree and getting back into the feature tree and knowing what they need to change is it's a really strong skill for students to work on and practice. So providing them times when they have a model that they need to actually edit is a great way to really understand those best practices, what makes sense in the long run for how you're going to build something.
Great. One more question here. I realize Onshape is a cloud-based product that is accessible from any device. What is the preferred device recommended for students to use when working in the Onshape platform in the classroom?
I don't even know if there is a preferred. I've seen students create amazing CAD models with like a 15-year-old busted up Chromebook. We have people at PTC that are amazing at using an iPad to do CAD models. So I think the preferred platform is the one you've got.
I think I'd add to that, any platform that you can get your students on and using is the best platform. As long as they're getting a chance to model, that's going to be the winning combination.
All right, actually, there's another question here too. Is the curriculum suitable for tech college level?
Absolutely. I've seen fifth graders use this, and I mean, if you're new to CAD, the curriculum is appropriate to you. And so I think that works for any age. And in a tech college, as you're learning Onshape, the first unit gets you just into the Onshape tool, but then eventually you're doing some pretty complex stuff, some collaborative assignments. And so I think that would be fantastic at the college level.
We've been able to share this with some adults, and it's been a great experience. They've done very well with it. So hopefully that helps answer that too.
And a great question that I think we should really address here is the things that we've been talking about. Can they be done in the free versions of Onshape? Is there a specific version that you need to be on?
Great question. And everything we've talked about is accessible in the free version.
Great. All right. Well, that seems to wrap it up for our questions today. So thank you everyone for joining us.